So hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. Now I've been lucky enough to be joined by Dan Bigham today on the channel, and we're going to ask him all sorts of questions about his and his partner and fiance Joss's hour record attempts. Joss just broke the ladies world record for the hour, and Dan just went after the Bradley Wiggins British hour record and smashed that by about 200 meters. We're going to talk about juicy things like UCI, doping, kit, all the nerdy kit questions you've been posting in. Now I tried to cover as many of your questions as I could within the time that we had. We both got quite busy schedules, especially Dan, and one of the questions for him was how do you fit everything in, spinning so many plates at the same time, you know, aero consulting, watch shop, training to do world championships. Yeah, I've got as much stuff as in there as I could, but let me know in the comment sections down below if you think I've missed anything, and I'm sure we can get Dan on again in the future, maybe for the hour world record attempt. Who knows, and let's see, but I hope you enjoyed the questions. Cheers. Just to clear up, Dan, for the people that aren't so clear on the background of the hour records, why was the UCI backing Joss's hour as a legitimate record attempt, but not yours?
If you're not at that level, not Pro Continental, not World Tour, then the overhead is on you as an athlete. If you want to play that game and enter, then you need to pay the £8,000 fee per annum to get on. And I definitely don't advocate against anti-doping. I'm definitely pro clean sport, and I think that the registered testing pool is the right system to have in place. I just feel that the barriers to entry are wrong, that you as an athlete shouldn't be forced to put a lot of cash up for something that is basically to access a certain level of events. What the solution is, I don't particularly know, but the overhead is always on the athlete. It doesn't cost a huge amount to put an athlete onto that program, and they've got to sit there and tell you, the tester, where they are every single day. It just comes down to the world governing bodies to make a decision and say, well, look, this isn't fair that Dan can do every event in the world other than the hour record and Zwift World Championships, of course, the two pinnacle events of the sport.
So does that make you frustrated then that let's just hypothesize that you did go and beat Victor's record outright not at altitude like Victor did his? Would you have liked to have done that and then say, well, you know, look, UCI, this kind of makes a mockery of the system. I'm not legitimately a record holder. Or were you comfortable with the fact that, you know, you just fell a little bit short of Victor's record, and then you can still have another pop at that when maybe you can get onto the program?
I think it would have been nice to have beaten Victor. Don't get me wrong. I think would have put the cat amongst the pigeons, as it were, and the UCI would have had a bit of a problem to deal with, and probably more of a media fallout to then address the problem head on. Which
surely not more bad press for the UCI.
I think I give them enough headaches as it is, but I think it would have been a good one to have done that. However, I'm now in a situation where I'm fairly confident it's achievable to beat Victor, and I can go out and search for the funding and the support I need to then go and attempt it properly.
Moving on to the second point, before we get too technical on the records, talking about your time, we can come back to Joss in a minute, but you beat Brad by about 200 meters in the hour. From my point of view, watching the live stream on Cycling Dane channel, it seemed like you were just going through the motions. You'd done the calculation, and you pretty much knew that morning that you would beat the record. How accurate is that? Did you know that morning when you woke up you were going to beat Brad by about 200 meters? Because it just looked like to me you were just going through the motions, and then when you crossed the line, it didn't look that much of a surprise to you. It looked quite comfortable, I have to say.
I think when you look at the numbers, look at the physics and believe in them, and you build a model that you've validated so many times over many different events and many years, and you continue to refine it. Once that's kind of been proven in multiple events, you can get a lot of confidence and a lot of comfort from that. And especially the day before with Joss, we'd basically gone through the exact same preparation, the same testing, and then gone to execute, and it worked flawlessly for her. She'd done a perfect ride, basically, and exactly what we thought was achievable. So to then say, well, if I apply the exact logic, model, physics, etc. to my event, then it shows that I can beat Bradley. And it's a scary thought, but you just have to take belief from that. And I think it's quite confidence inspiring to sit on the start line and go, all I have to do is execute to the best of my ability, and this is achievable. Mm-hmm. And then just stick to the plan, break it down. Don't think about the end goal of actually riding 54.5. It's just, okay, I've got to do these splits for this long, and away we go.
And who decided to go first? Was it toss a coin between you and Joss, like who was going to be the guinea pig, and who was going to take the first bit of air density and see if it fit the calc?
So it was mostly focused around Joss. So we had to pick her date about 6 months in advance, which is another frustrating thing of the UCI Hour Record, that everything has to be done literally months in advance. So you pick a date with your best guess of when you're going to get low air pressure at that velodrome, and obviously looking back historically and saying, oh, we'll pick that Friday or that Thursday. But I think as well, having Joss go first meant that I could fully commit to supporting her for that and not be stressed in the run up to hers with mine. I know they kind of overlap as well, but it meant that I just had this one day where I could switch off from the worries of my event and focus purely on making sure Joss has the best environment around her to execute her performance, and kind of distracted me for a good 24 hours. And gave me the confidence when my event rolled around that it was achievable.
The questions that everyone seems to be asking, that a few people have spied, I think, through your Instagram and maybe WatchShop or Ribble Weldsight's Instagram. A couple of days before your hour, you were, I think, testing some very, very narrow base bars on the bike. And then during the attempt, I don't know if you can share with us what happened. Were they not faster, or something happened to them, or were they not allowed? What's the story behind those? Because we know you're famous for the narrow handlebars on the road. And yeah, it does make sense to use a narrow base bar because you're on them for about 5 to 10 seconds at the start of the event, and then you don't touch them again. So what happened to the narrow base bar?
Still in the works, I'd say. So those images were from back in February at one of our test runs, and GCN actually filmed the bike, but I don't think the video's gone out yet, so no one's really clocked it. But they were very narrow. I think outside to outside, I have to check, but it was like 22 centimeters, 24 centimeters, something like that. But yeah, there's something in it, but the wake of the handlebar is pretty important for aerodynamics of the entire rider. And as much as Hambini goes, no, there's nothing there, unfortunately, there is something there. And the wake and how it influences drag crisis on the upper leg is pretty important. And especially when you're trying to optimize everything for set speed, set cadence, set fabric on your leg, then what happens upstream definitely does influence what happens downstream. And you're obviously trying to holistically improve the whole system. There is probably going to be a benefit from them when I've had a bit more time to test and improve. But in the outset, actually, there was basically nothing there. You're trying to induce drag crisis, so obviously laminar to turbulent boundary layer, and then keep the flow attached, reduce the pressure drag. And you typically do that either by going faster, having a bigger leg, or increasing the roughness. So you can do a multitude or a combination thereof. You obviously can't go any faster. That speed's determined. Your leg is the size that it is. So you either change the fabric or do something to the airflow that your leg is experiencing. And then it's tweaking between the two. So what fabric do you choose for your leg, or do you create some turbulence further upstream, which is what the Ribble handlebar did. I don't think on the road I don't know, it's me putting my neck out there. I think there's definitely gains to be had. However, I think it's very person specific, leg size specific, fabric specific, your specific, which obviously for the velodrome for the hour record is super easy to optimize for because everything's nice and steady state.
You spoke about Hambini and his aero beliefs in there, but this question was actually from Hambini. How do you manage your time training, running the consulting side of your business and running WatchShop? I mean, clearly you do all three, and obviously there's more to that, but you do all of them to quite a high level. And how many hours a week do you think you would say you were training before certainly World Champs TT and the hour record?
I'd have to check back on hours a week. I'd probably say I average somewhere between 15 and 20 hours a week. It does depend. I managed to get a good training camp in Sierra Nevada beforehand. It's not easy to manage, definitely not. And I don't think there's like a silver bullet or a secret of I wake up at 4 a.m. and do this mad stuff that you're probably reading some stupid book of like how these top entrepreneurs, yeah. I don't buy into it. Yeah. I think you just have to be passionate about what you do and accept that sometimes, you have to give up evenings or social events and whatever else to focus on what matters to you. And if that means that you're training at 7, 8, 9, 10 p.m. at night, or having to get up early and do a specific session, or having to take the bike on the road with you on the way to some consultancy meeting and have to do a turbo and a lay-by, then you just have to accept that's kind of par for the course. Maybe it doesn't all work together as well as I'd hope. And I think I've said it openly before that it probably negatively does impact on my athletic performance to be running a business and doing all the consulting and everything else. I think everything around me is quite supportive of my ambitions. So WatchShop especially my brother Grant basically runs it to all intents and purposes. He's awesome at keeping the wheels on the track, and I just kind of direct and bring the ideas and work on the R&D side, and don't have to worry so much on the actual backroom stuff that's actually pretty intensive with, I don't know, all financial management, stock management, and all that kind of stuff that's mental. And then with consulting, literally every team that I work with are super open and really helpful. Denmark especially, to the point that I was actually training with the Danish national team. So I was on track with them, even though I'm there in an aero R&D role. They're like, well, if we throw you in for the team pursuit, you're probably going to pick up a whole lot more of what happened.
I heard you say after your hour attempt, you know, like you don't have 400 watts to play with, or 400 plus watts to play with for the hour, like maybe Brad or some of the other current athletes had. Do you have a figure in your head to say, right, if I was a full-time cyclist and I didn't have consulting business and I didn't have watch shop business, do you actually literally have a wattage number in your head to say, right, this could be my wattage, or could I reduce my CDA literally if I had more time to train?
I think I'd struggle on reducing the CDA too much more. Oh, I definitely have thought about it. I think if I trained just more consistently for longer, I would just continue to improve. The last 12 months, last 18 months since COVID's come around, I've been able to, because I haven't been jet setting all around the world to all manner of random races and meetings and everything else. So I've been able to basically sit at home and train, which I've never had before, which is why I've made a big step forward from basically before lockdown to now, that I've just had the ability to have consistent training load, and that's worth its weight in gold. And consistent recovery and consistent sleep, consistent diet, everything, just consistency. And I think that's the biggest thing to advocate for as a pro athlete, that you just want the monotony of eat, sleep, train, repeat. And you don't get that when you've got everything else going on in your life. So a number, I don't know. I think I'd ideally just continue my trajectory. I'm sort of about 15 watts up on my threshold over the last 12 months or so, which is quite nice. Okay. Another 12 months of that puts me, another 15 watts higher. Whether that's genuinely achievable, I don't know. But maybe, if I was in that situation, I could probably find, 15, 20 watts more. And that puts me a good further bit up the road.
That'll all get eaten up when you go up the hill to Mexico, I guess. But it's an offset, so you'll be all good. Going back to another technical question, drivetrains on the bikes, that's really a big point of discussion at the moment. You've been working with New Motion Labs, I think, on their new kind of chain prototype. But I think for this, you and Joss were using Izumi chains, just normal track 1/8-inch chains, right?
Yeah, nothing super special there. The plan was to run the New Motion Labs 1/2-inch pitch, so the standard pitch.
Right.
Chain ring, but that only worked with the Kratos crank, which we couldn't run in the end, which is kind of a bit of a frustrating thing, but basically meant that we went back to just a normal setup. We were always going to run the Izumi Kai chain, though. It was the fastest chain that I've tested personally. Technology is, from what I gather, much the same as what's in the Dura-Ace chain, which is the fastest 11-speed chain there is currently. So it was a bit of a no-brainer looking at what tech it had, and the test results back that up. So, it's the chain that we use. It's the chain that the Danish Federation used in Tokyo. There's not a huge amount in it. We're talking 0.1% for all these little improvements. Like, there's no silver bullets. You can't just throw a chain on and find 20 watts. You're talking finding a watt or two here and there. But it was just a really good chain. They were keen to support us as well when I said, do you mind connecting us up with a few chains, because they're not cheap and not easy to get hold of.
Can you mention what is the technology that you find in that and the like a Dura-Ace chain?
So a lot of it comes down to tolerancing and surface treatments. And then beyond that, it's actually making sure you've run the chain in properly and have the right lubricant for that chain, because that's a whole other thing. Does one lubricant work with this chain, even though it's got a different surface finish, surface coating? Was it designed accordingly? So I think that's something that Josh Portner at Silka has been banging on about quite a bit, that he's developed his lubricant to work with his diamond slurry polished chain. And I think there's something in it. The problem is it's getting to this smaller and smaller level of optimization, and New Motion Labs have a really good rig for looking at the absolute efficiency, and you're getting in the region of like 98, 99% in some setups. And as much as it's great to find a 50% improvement, well done, you found 1%. So in my case, 3.5 watts, and 1% is huge in drivetrain efficiency. So we're kind of approaching that asymptote, and there's not going to be much more. We obviously can't get more than 100% efficient, and starting to scrape the barrel maybe now.
Similarly, with the chain technology, we've seen lots of different manufacturers and, you know, kind of small boutique brands that are bringing out, you know, big plates, TT plates, experimenting with different materials. You see like carbon fiber chain rings, obviously normal chain ring material, maybe 7075 aluminium, or even, you know, old school steel chain rings. How much difference is there in the material of the chain ring like there is in the material of the chain? Is that something you experiment with?
Yeah, it's something that within Watchshop we've been doing quite a bit of development on for the last 12 months, and found, again, small improvements, 0.1%, which make a difference. But in simple terms, carbon fiber for reducing coefficient of friction is the winner. And then we've been playing around with putting different friction modifiers into the matrix and found some good improvements there. So that's the technology that we'll be pushing pretty soon once we've kind of gone out of prototype phase and into production. So I've been testing them, Joss has been testing them, we've had a few guys on the road testing them. So there's definitely something in it from that side, but you want to make sure the durability is there, because carbon fiber in the drivetrain isn't exactly renowned for durability, and I've had a lot of bad experiences in my time with snapping teeth off and all manner of things. So there's a trade-off to be made there between performance and durability, but it's making sure you strike that trade-off properly. Beyond that, though, you can get some pretty good aluminium chain rings. It's just a combination of you're going to lose a little bit in the friction side and also add a bit in the weight. And to be honest, carbon looks a whole lot cooler on a crankset. I mean, the other thing you can play with as well is tooth geometry. You've got multiple different areas of loss within the drivetrain system, and we're trying to improve it with either the materials or the geometry of the chain, the lubricant in the chain, the material of the tooth, and then also the geometry of the tooth, which is where New Motion Labs really comes into its own. Historically, people are just basically changing the ramp angle of the tooth so that it doesn't slide up as much. Whereas now they've gone to this point, you effectively, by dropping one tooth out, you introduce an additional degree of freedom, which enables a whole plate setup to then rotate. And then when it rotates, it can lock onto a tooth. If it's locked onto the tooth, it can't roll up or down, so there can't be friction there.
Yeah. Yet another technical question. Helmet choice. I've also seen Joss using the POC helmet, which you guys brought back into fashion from the fancy dress cupboard like a couple of seasons ago now. Well, probably about 4 years ago, I guess, with the Hoob Watt Bike team.
Yeah.
And you've gone away from that. You've gone back to a casque.
Yeah.
There was my kind of, I mean, when you look at Joss on her bike, that helmet is fairing like her whole frontal area of her upper body, and it just seems to work spot on. But it does seem to me that helmet is a good choice for a rider with wider shoulders, because, you know, it can bridge that gap between head and shoulder, and kind of prevent some of the bluff body there. But you've gone away from that. Can you tell us briefly why?
In simple terms, because the casque was faster.
Right. Do you have any ideas why?
Yeah. I think a lot of people think I'm wedded to the POC temper, and unfortunately there's no sacred cows here. If something's faster, then I don't care what it is, I'm running the fastest option. And it often, I think, frustrates team members, team managers, sponsors, that I'm like, okay, so that helmet was great last year, but now actually, no, sorry, want something different. And effectively, well, there's a lot of things going on at the front end. There's a lot of interaction, obviously, between the rider's helmet, their shoulders, their upper arms, and their position. So that's why helmets are unique, and what works with one person doesn't necessarily work with another. And then what I found is there's a lot of sensitivity between basically the suit that I use and the helmet. And I'm not talking massive. I'm talking at our record pace, like 2 watts difference, which is 100 meters. So 100 meters difference between helmets, but it's consistent. Like, I've tested it 4, 5, 6 times now, the different helmets with different suits. And it's just how the technology works on my skin suit, that it needs clearer air to function very well, as opposed to the POC that tends to fare your shoulders quite heavily, and doesn't particularly work so well with the tech that I've got in my skin suit.
So another question about pacing and your psychology. You mentioned, the psychology of this kind of hour effort is extremely important. You need to be on the right side of that line in terms of suffering or going out too hard, that you can always feel like you have something left and you're in a good state of mind. Obviously, from a standing start, your average speed is always going to be tending up. So that's kind of a tick in the box of a bit of a psychological boost. But how confident were you in terms of your negative splits, and how important do you think that is in terms of positive psychology, to be able to be on that right side of I can do this, rather than this is just torture and I'm getting slower?
Keeping your head throughout the hour is pretty critical to performance. It's something that with Johnny and Tipper and Mehdi, we'd focused on a lot. So that's why I'd done so many practice runs. So like 4 full gas standing hours, lots of like 30, 45, 60-minute flying efforts. And you can change your pacing and change what you think about. Do you have music? Do you not? Do you focus on lap splits? Do you focus on average speed? Do you just focus on riding the line and forget everything else? So having a proper strategy to break the event down. And yeah, the negative split for me worked really well for my physiology and my headspace as well, so that I was always feeling like it was a race rather than like this, I don't know what you'd call it, like a constant pace time trial until you pop or don't pop. It was a nice way to chunk the record down. And my strategy was to be 27 seconds down on Wiggins at halfway, which I didn't tell to everyone, my mum included, and she was losing her head in track centre until someone explained to her that this is all part of the plan. Right. But it meant, I had a lot of time to make up, but it also meant that it became this kind of proper race at the back end, and the first half or so was relatively cruisy because I'm riding at like 320, 330 watts for the first sort of 20 minutes or so, and then start ramping. So it's quite relatively chill. And just, more enjoyable, I think, rather than our records where I've gone out on pace. And then it does get hard, obviously, at some point. But you want it to be hard on your terms, where you're pushing it to be hard rather than sustaining pace. And it gets harder and harder and harder, which in my head was mentally a harder challenge to do, as opposed to going, right, this is on me now. I've got to suffer, but it's on my terms and I'm going to push it to the absolute limit, as opposed to, just slowly grinding it out and slowly slowing up, which is pretty much what every other hour record's been. Even Wiggins especially, he went out at 55 and by the end he was down at 54. Okay, it's not a massive decrement, but it's enough that it's not enjoyable.
Dan just mentioned, for the first, I don't know how many minutes, but you were averaging about 320, 330.
Yeah, something like that. I should probably run.
I think a lot of people will kind of, clean their ears out after hearing that, but that is how low your CDA is. That's achievable. Those speeds are achievable, because when we're on a track, we're only talking about watts per CDA per psychology. That's basically it, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. That's a good way of putting it.
If you're, do you know how many watts Wiggins did? Like, have you calculated? It was over 400, wasn't it? 410, something like that? Or
somewhere
more?
In that ballpark. I don't know for sure, and he didn't run a power meter, so it's just calculated watts. But right. People have said all the way up to 450, which I genuinely don't believe. I reckon somewhere in the region of 410 to 420, maybe 430, really. Most guys, okay. So Jens Voigt was 412, Rowan Dennis was 420. I think Matthias Brandler was about the same, 420-ish.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm nowhere near that.
So you average, what, 350? Or is that
about 355, give or take, yeah.
Right.
I need to like doubly check all the numbers and everything else, but yeah, about 355.
Was this the fastest hour you've ever done? Sorry, the fastest hour? What are we in? Some sort of time shift, Inception or Interstellar? No. Was this the furthest you've gone in an hour?
Just, yes. So I'd gone 54.7 with a flying start, whereas this was 54.723 with a standing start, which is, if you normalise it, there's 200 metres in a standing start. So effectively, I'd done a 54.5 in training and went 54.7 in the actual event.
Wow, okay. So legit is the fastest effort you've done.
Yeah.